What I'd like to talk to you about next is our noise program specifically. So the one thing that we have to understand is what is DNL. DNL is the metric that the FAA requires us to use in order to analyze all of our noise programs and our noise mitigation programs that are associated with those noise contours. So it's a yearly average of noise, and it has a penalty for nighttime flights. In other words, that metric tells us for every one nighttime flight that goes over, we penalize that. In other words, it's like 10 aircraft that fly over. Noise contours is produced out of what we call the integrated noise model, and all of the information that we have associated with the flights at the airport, in other words, what type of aircraft are flying at the airport, where those aircraft are flying, the north flow, south flow, the weather, everything associated with that is put into the integrated noise model, which produces the DNL contours. The FAA has indicated that 65 is the DNL contour that is impacted. So anything within inside the 65 DNL contour is considered impacted and potentially eligible for noise mitigation programs. In other words, we could do some additional insulation programs and such if it was inside the 65 DNL. What I'm pointing out here is in 1998, the black line represented our noise contour for that year. In other words, we had a lot of noisy aircraft flying in and out of the airport, and we had many, many more operations at the airport. So that noise contour was huge. When we took a look at the 2007 noise contour, this was from real operations. We had looked at everything that's flying in and out of the airport. We had a relatively smaller contour. So when we forecasted into the future, looking at what the 2010 contour would be, we found out that that contour is fairly a little bit shorter, but we had some increased noise on the west side simply for the third runway, since we knew that was going to be in operation at the time. This is the DNL contour. So what I'm trying to look at here is we looked at the 1997 Supplemental EIS Master Plan Update for that third runway, which projected out to 2010. That projection was based on 475,000 operations. In 2009, our operations are about 317,000 operations, significantly less operations at the airport. Our projections for 2010 now are 321,000 operations, so we're nowhere near what we had anticipated those operations being within the 1997 EIS. Also within the EIS, we had projected that there was going to be a lot of noisier aircraft out there. So for instance, the F-28, Horizon was flying those aircraft. We had projected that at about 2.5% of our operations. They're out of the fleet mix. A lot of those noisy aircraft are now out of the fleet mix. So what we would see today, if we were to go back in and redo that 2010 contour based on the operations levels we're seeing at the airport, based on the fleet mix at the airport, we would see even probably smaller contours than what we had projected in the EIS. We also have a complete noise monitoring program at the airport, so there's 25 noise monitoring sites around the airport. Those are used to analyze significant events, verify the noise contours, and record the historical noise. So they're all the way up towards the Maple Leaf Reservoir and all the way down towards the Twin Lake Elementary School. So there's quite a few out there. And by the way, those are based mainly on the departure corridors, because that's the noisiest aircraft departing. Jet aircraft to the south, we have north flow and south flow flight procedures, but I wanted to just really throw in an example of what we're seeing here, which is the south flow. So we're trying to keep the aircraft within certain corridors just to try to minimize the impacts on the communities. For the south, there's really not an answer down there. We have communities all the way down through Federal Way, of course, in the flight tracks. To the north, we have a little bit better of a benefit, so we can get those through the industrial corridor and out the bay. So we monitor these flight tracks or these flight corridors 24 hours a day to find out who's flying inside and outside of those corridors. If there are potentially a significant number of aircraft in the office, and sit down with her and discuss why those are out and seeing if we can improve those corridors in any way with the controllers. And I know Linda goes back to her controllers and discusses the issues too to try to improve the compliance to each noise abatement corridor. I think we're at about 97% with most of ours. Flight quiet program. This is a program that's a positive incentive for the airlines to do better at what they're doing. So we have 3 categories, which is the engine run-up. Anytime an aircraft has to test an engine on the airport, if they come in, there's a problem with that engine, they have to test that engine before they can fly that aircraft out. They have to abide by our rules and regulations with the run-up rules. Airline compliance with noise abatement corridors, that's the previous slide that I just showed you where the aircraft are flying in the sky. They have to comply with those corridors. Fleet mix and noise contributions. Is this thing cutting out a little bit? Okay, if it does go out, let me know. All right, the fleet mix and noise contributions. We have several noise monitors that we pull that data out of, and we find out which airline's actually flying quieter around the airport. At the end of the year, we award that airline an award by quietest passenger airline. Federal Express was the quietest cargo, and Air Canada turned out to be an honorable mention for that. We found out the airlines really do like to compete for this at this point. Another potentially beneficial program that we're having for the airport is we have partnered with the Alaska Airlines, the FAA, and Boeing to try and find ways to do things better in the skies within the corridors. And what we're calling this is the greener skies over Seattle. It's a way that we can fly the corridors better and use less fuel, reduced emissions, and some benefits to noise reduction to communities farther out. This is just an example of what we're looking at with Alaska Airlines and Boeing. Traditionally, farther out from the airport, an airline starts to make a step-down approach. Every time they make that step-down approach and they change the configuration of that aircraft, it not only uses fuel, it actually produces more noise. So if we can change that the way they're doing business in the sky, I'm flying that aircraft, and bring it down, that we call kind of an idle descent into the airport, cut back the power and probably flight idle, which if we're coming in from the south around Olympia, they'll cut that back to flight idle and just kind of glide into the airport. Still have power on, they're not totally out of power. What we're looking at is taking advantage of noise corridors in areas that improve the less people impacted around the region. So we know we can use this noise corridor through the bay. So if we can eliminate all of those aircraft that are coming northbound and bring them in the bay, that would be a benefit. We don't have as many people with overflights. We're a ways off from this. Its technology needs to be implemented. The airlines need to be on board with it, with all of their technology, the FAA's technology, but it's something coming into the future. Okay, back to the third runway real quick. We knew we were opening that third runway. We knew there was noise associated with that third runway. So north of the airport, we have purchased 70 residential properties in the north approach transition zone. That's an area north of the third runway that is impacted by aircraft, low-flying aircraft, and noise. So they had to be inclusive to the 65 DNO contour and within the approach transition zone for that. So those homes have been purchased and are in the process, or have been relocated. I think we have like one holdout in that area that we're working with. And 87 homes sound insulated north of the third runway. So there's an area, go to the next slide, go to this one here. This area here was anticipated in a projected noise contour, that 2010 contour that I showed you earlier, to have an increased noise level. So through that program, again, we were eligible by FAA funds to go in and do more mitigations, what we did. So 87 more homes were sound insulated for the third runway. Total noise mitigation at the airport. We've done a lot of work at the airport. $500 million spent to date on all noise mitigation programs. I think that's significant. I think that's a real benefit to this community. 9,300 single-family homes have been insulated out of that. 7 condominium complexes, 5 mobile home parks acquired, the Highline School District and sound mitigation funding, along with the Port of Seattle, the Federal Aviation Administration, we're contributing $100 million for that. Those are total reconstruction. I'm sure your community is fully aware and have seen these very nice schools that's being built. Highline Community College, that's south, just right down, I forget what street it's off of down here in Des Moines. And we're contributing to 22 eligible buildings. We've completed 12 of those buildings with sound mitigation.